Tonight on Greater Boston, I'm Sue O'Connell in for Jim Browdy, and we're talking the race for governor here in Massachusetts, plus the particular concerns for women experiencing homelessness. First up, weeks, months, years of speculation finally came to an end today with Attorney General Maura Healey's announcement.
My team protected students and homeowners from predatory lenders, took on ExxonMobil for lying about climate change, and Purdue Pharma and the Sacklers for fueling the opioid epidemic. I've stood with you as the people's lawyer, and now I'm running to be your governor.
Healey, of course, made history as the first openly gay state attorney general in the country when she took office in 2015 and gained national attention for several of the lawsuits she mentioned in that video, plenty of which pitted her squarely against the Trump administration. With more than $3.5 million in the bank and a strong name recognition, some political observers argue it's her race to lose, with State Senator Sonia Chang-Diaz and Harvard professor Danielle Allen having already declared as well. But Healey certainly has her critics too. Joining me to discuss all things about the governor's race, Shannon O'Brien, former state treasurer and Democratic gubernatorial candidate in the 2002 election against Mitt Romney, and Erin O'Brien, associate professor of political science at UMass Boston. O'Brien's, welcome. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining me tonight. I want to start with you first, Erin, just to talk about what a great rollout this was. We were talking about this for, I made a joke about years, but for like 4 days, she had press coverage about whether or not she was or she wasn't and when she did. So from just an objective political rollout, it went pretty well.
I think so. I think her and her team have to be very happy. They've dominated press coverage for 3 or 4 days. Like you said, they've got all the money and they've got they want to come out with an air of inevitability. And I think they accomplished that thus far.
Yeah, I want to talk about that. I want to first, Shannon, before we chat with you, look at the statement that Danielle Allen posted on her website, of course, about Healey's decision to join the governor's race. Danielle Allen says, "I'm in this race and I've been in it for a year to make sure Massachusetts has a real choice, a choice between a perspective ready to meet the moment and business as usual." Shannon O'Brien, it's an interesting spot for Maura Healey to be in. Obviously, with Sonia Chang-Diaz also in the race, she's going to be a little bit of the conservative institutional candidate in the primary, no?
I don't know if the first openly gay attorney general can be the conservative, but the fact is, what I really think is important about her, entering this race as an attorney general, we've seen attorneys general, run for governor unsuccessfully on a number of occasions. But I think that Maura brings something different, and it's not so much the left, right, center, even, the issues as much as she brings this personality. And I think that is one of the things that makes it very good for her as a candidate, because a lot of I remember the first, and this is not to make a bad statement about Tom Riley, but I remember the first time I had a press conference with him, and I'm the treasurer, and there had been thefts of millions of dollars out of the treasury. And I walk into the room and I'm going, "Hey, hi," like typical politician, "How you doing, Joe?" And he walks in and it's like a dead body on the floor. And so, but he was a real cop. And I think that what Maura sort of transcends here, and again, not to disparage, because you have two other incredibly talented progressive women in this race also, but she is just a wonderful person, and she brings this personality to the race that I think transcends that sort of top cop, and that she brings a sort of empathy and an understanding that makes her different from other attorney general candidates. But again, this is not to take away from the other two women who are in the race, because they're both incredibly capable and talented.
I actually volunteered on the Tom Riley governors before I was a journalist on his campaign, and we spent a lot of time telling him to smile. And he said, usually, if you see me, it's bad news. What do you want me to do? Right. So, but to that point, Erin O'Brien, the list of attorneys general who have run and lost for this. Martha Coakley, Tom Riley, Frank Bellotti, Scott Harshbarger, and that's just from this century. We're not even going back further. It's hard for the law enforcement person who's in that spot to sometimes overcome that, and especially in this progressive state, with our massive independent voters still, but still really put forward a progressive democratic agenda. No?
I think that's true. But I think what's different about this race, as Shannon said, she's a path breaker. She's well known, and she's known as a liberal, not necessarily progressive, but a liberal in that top spot who's pushing back against a very unpopular Trump administration in Massachusetts. So I think all those things are going for her, on top of the fact the current candidate who should emerge on the Republican side is Jeff Deal. Jeff Deal already ran statewide against Elizabeth Warren and got crushed. He is a Trump representative. Massachusetts has a taste for moderate GOP governors. It does not have a taste for Donald Trump, and that's who Jeff Deal is. So I think the conditions she's running are different, and she's a really quality candidate, as Shannon put forth.
I want to take a look at the statement that Jeff Deal released regarding Healey's announcement. And in part, it says, over the past year, we have seen the sad results of failed Democratic leadership in Washington, and continues, and most of all, our nation stands profoundly divided. Maura Healey's announcement signals that the start of a race by Democratic candidates to double down on these failed policies right here in Massachusetts. Shannon O'Brien, assuming that Maura Healey gets through the primary and faces off against Jeff Deal, not to get too over our skis here, but does this mean that we're going to be in a situation where we have a Trump mandate, a Trump referendum in Massachusetts, where Jeff Deal is running on all the ways that Maura Healey attacked Trump and all the ways that Trump is good, and Maura Healey is running a different sort of race?
I think Maura Healey would, or any of the Democratic candidates would, thank their lucky stars if this is a referendum on Trump. Jeff Deal just last week had an event, with one of the domestic terrorists, who invaded the Capitol building. And so, I just don't think, he does not follow in the footsteps of moderate to liberal, Republicans, Frank Sargent, Bill Weld, Jane Swift, Paul Cellucci, and even Mitt Romney when Mitt Romney was governor, and Charlie Baker. I just think that, Massachusetts is a blue state. We voted for George McGovern, but the fact is we are an independent state that likes to see balance. And I just don't think that the sort of right-wing brand of politics that Jeff Deal, who, by the way, is a former Democrat, that Jeff Deal really is espousing right now, the sort of hatred that has come from, Donald Trump and sort of his ilk, and the continuing, exposure of the sort of crime wave that has taken place, whether it's just, finding out that Wilbur Ross, even more, not only lying to Congress about the census, but even more, corruption of the census process, the uncovering of these things about the administration broadly. I don't know if I'm Jeff Deal, if I want to be defending that stuff. You can go after, anybody that you want to, but I think that if it is a Trump referendum, you're going to see this being a very difficult race for him to get traction or raise enough money.
We've mentioned Sonia Chang Diaz, who has been in the race for a long time before Governor Baker announced that he would not be running. She had a response on Twitter today, a Twitter thread that said things like, Maura and I have differing views on priorities and governing, and I look forward to her joining the ongoing conversation we've been having across our state. We must build a movement across age, race, class, and faith to elect a governor who's shown they'll take on tough fights for change, even when it's not politically convenient. Erin, I would note that Ben Dowling was in the race recently, too, and dropped out, citing funding and inability to raise enough money to be viable. What do you think will happen regarding fundraising? Are we going to see some defections from the race? Maura Healey already coming in with all this money, and should people be really considering if they should stay in the race or not?
Well, I mean, that's for them to decide. But, Ben looked at his bottom line and he didn't have enough money. Sonia Chang Diaz has about $200,000 by last count. And, I don't know about Alan, but I actually think Sonia Chang Diaz is one reason that Maura Healey, even though I think she was in all along, had some trepidation, because progressive activists have gone to Chang Diaz. These are the individuals who were with Bernie, and they were with Markey, and then they were with Michelle Wu. And those progressive activists, it is a small sector of the electorate, but they are vocal. They are saying, what is Maura Healey offering that Sonia Chang Diaz is not? And I think the reason that she got in is because she has a great answer to that question. She ran an administration. She has individual accomplishments. If you're a state senator, however talented, you still have to deal with all the other state senators to get anything done. So I do think Chang Diaz gave her a bit of a pause because she's used to being the progressive liberal darling of that small sector. When she ran against Tolman, the progressives were with her and the Democratic establishment was not. That said, if you don't have the money, you can't run the race. And if Maura Healey looks like a foregone conclusion, why donate to candidates that can't win? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy.
On the progressive issue, and to get back to you, Shannon O'Brien, the issue of marijuana is one that Maura Healey was not on the winning side for. In a 2016 op-ed, Healey wrote with Governor Baker and Mayor Walsh. The title of it was, "Mass Should Not Legalize Marijuana." They argued against the ballot question, which of course the voters later approved 54 to 46%. The ACLU, of course, has been noting that black people are 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than white people. There are a number of issues from her position as a law enforcement person, as an Attorney General, which will make her vulnerable from an attack from Sonia Chang Diaz and from Danielle Allen. But I wonder, does that also make her more appealing to the vast number of independents in the state who have voted for Democrats on one hand and for Republicans as governor in the other?
There certainly will be enough issues for this Democratic field to debate. And I don't think you're going to find 100%, unanimity on any issue. And I just, the marijuana issue is something that does incorporate social justice. And since that has been passed, social justice and economic opportunity, frankly, I think that the administration can be doing a better job to make sure that they implement and make real some of the promises of social equity that were put in place with the passage of that law. But the bottom line is, and it was what Erin was saying, it's not just money, and I would bet today that Maura Healey, probably has closer to $4 million in the bank. I heard she raised over $150,000 by breakfast this morning. And that is just, pent up enthusiasm. I will say that Danielle Allen has been surprising in her ability to raise funds. And for someone who'd never run for office before, I think she had $600,000 in the bank at the end of last year. But it's not just money. It's also sort of the mechanics. It's understanding. And I can't tell you how many candidates have called me to say, thinking about running for statewide office. I'm so passionate. I'm passionate. But the fact is, it's not just money. It's the mechanics of how do you, get past the Democratic nominating process at the convention. How do you get that percent to get your name on the ballot? How do you put together a statewide organization? One of the things that was different when I ran, and I cannot believe it's been 20 years since I ran for governor, that the internet, is a great equalizer. It can help you raise money. It can help you reach out to the Bernie bros. One of the secret weapons that Ed Markey had when it looked like Joe Kennedy was going to be the juggernaut, and that was where the safe money was. There was a group of under the radar teenagers, 20 somethings, that really gave energy to the Markey campaign that really helped turn things around for him. So I don't underestimate how much money Maura has, but it's really the mechanics. What does it mean, in a modern internet era of running a campaign? How can, some of those other candidates put together the tools that they need for a successful race in September?
Erin O'Brien, we noted it in the open, and we've talked about it a little bit. Maura Healey is a lesbian. She's been openly gay in a state where marriage equality was born and birthed, and where, the very first openly gay elected official, Elaine Noble in Cambridge in the 1970s, was a state rep. Do you think that it's going to be an issue in some way in this campaign, or are we now sort of just far past that we just need to note it and move on?
It's historic, and that's always a big deal. So my view is that should be celebrated. In terms of how it plays electorally, honestly, it helps her with the left. And anyone who isn't voting for Maura Healey because she's a lesbian wouldn't vote for her on policy anyway. And from what I know about Maura Healey, she will enjoy, if she were to win, being able to, sort of stick that flag and be prideful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we shouldn't gloss over the basketball aspect, Shannon O'Brien. I mean,
I was just going to say that.
Go ahead.
Can I tell you? That's one of the things, is that this is incredibly sexist, but watching her twirl a basketball is absolutely the cutest. But I used to go and campaign, with a group of these old guys, World War II and Korean War veterans, and they love the fact that, I played soccer, and they thought, oh my God, and I don't use that word cute or feisty. I kind of hate those words, but the fact is that is appealing to some of those more, blue collar guys. We might not be able to get them, back in an election this year, but she, again, it's that sort of quality of her sort of personality that I think opens doors for her, where, maybe 20 years ago they might be been shut, but I think that she appeals to, a broader sector. Some will, point to the historic nature of her candidacy, but I ultimately think that it's going to be the strength. The fact that she's a basketball player is, to me, endlessly, interesting that she played that on the professional level. And I think it is this thing that, makes her appealing to people who might not necessarily.
I teach sports and politics, and I will say that she could do all that at 5'4" is impressive.
No kidding. I had no idea I had a shot. I'm crying over here. All right, Shannon O'Brien.
Massachusetts likes scrappy.
We do.
And one thing I'm watching for is, I want to see, does Charlie Baker endorse in this race? Or does he give a soft nod to Maura Healey, who I think he likes a lot more than he likes Jeff Deal?
Well, stay tuned.
To bond over.
Stay tuned. We'll have more. Erin O'Brien, Shannon O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us with your insight. Thank you.
Thank you.
When the last tents were cleared out of the area known as Mass and Cass last week, the city placed more than 100 people into short-term housing units. But there are plenty more people across the city who haven't gotten that kind of help for a variety of reasons. And when it comes to women experiencing homelessness, they're at a far higher risk than men. An issue my next guest is looking to address. Jennifer Hanlon Wigon is the executive director of the Boston Day Shelter Women's Lunch Place. She joins me now. Jennifer, welcome. Talk to me a little bit about what particular types of risks women are at when they're experiencing homelessness when compared to men or their peers.
Sure. Well, Sue, thank you for having me. And putting the spotlight on the particular needs of women who are homeless. And we know that violence and trauma actually is a main pathway into homelessness for women. And unfortunately, in a situation of being homeless, they're even at higher risk for physical and sexual assault. So they have unique needs to men in terms of their physical health, their gynecological health, feminine hygiene, and all of these things are, more difficult to take care of, and it's more difficult just to access care and products to take care of yourself when you're homeless.
I read your piece that you had posted at your website, and I was shocked at how I had not always really looked at the tents that were at Mass and Cass and the Newmarket area in the same way that you were looking at them and seeing them in a different way. Can you talk a little bit about what you wrote when you see these tents and these shelters that were at Mass and Cass, what they represent to you and what you see happening?
Right. I mean, first of all, they represent a small amount of the homeless women in Boston, because women are homeless in that type of situation throughout the city. And women look for safety for themselves. And so that means hiding. And so we are concerned that that women don't reach out to the outreach vans. They don't want to be seen by them. They don't want to be counted in the homeless count. And so we know that these women are doing the best they feel for themselves to be safe, but that these are clearly unsafe environments for women. And we also see when we look at those tents, we know that women are being sexually trafficked in those tents and they're being assaulted. And these are difficult, I think, it's difficult for people to understand that in some ways that is their community, but it's not a safe community. And that's why places like Women's Lunch Place are so important, because they are gender specific and they're safe. They're safe for women to come in and start to work on services that can help them be on a better pathway, whether that's connecting to mental health support or recovery support. But when you're in a place like Women's Lunch Place, where you're getting really good nutrition on a regular basis, you start to heal your physical body. You can start to hopefully in a relationship that sometimes takes years to establish, you can start to work on those sort of advocacy issues.
You know, Jennifer, I'm at Massancast a lot and been covering the issues there in particular for a long time, and I'm always struck by how suddenly we pay attention to something and then suddenly we want a quick fix. And of course, the tents came to sort of represent fixing it, when we all know that there were plenty of people who were not living in tents or were using the tents and are still experiencing homelessness and still in the city and the surrounding communities, if not the entire state. I'm just want you to expand a little bit on building those relationships with the clients that you have, and the particular challenges that women have, I think. I mean, obviously, lots of trauma causes people to be experiencing homelessness, but women sometimes bring the additional trauma of domestic abuse or fleeing a situation where they've had no power or were in danger. Can you talk about how you bridge that, how you get to people to get them the help when they're experiencing that type of trauma?
Yeah, sure. I mean, intimate partner violence and domestic violence, those are key drivers of homelessness for women. And it generally leads to homelessness because they've lost the financial support of a partner. They often have children that they're caring for, and they many times have not had access to the social determinants of health. So they haven't had the educational support that can get them employment at a living wage. So I think that what's important at Women's Lunch Place is that we have a very low threshold. There's no intake process. And we just welcome people into a community that is positive and supportive, and we let folks know what source of services we have, but we never force a service on somebody. And our staff works really well to establish relationships with the guests so that they can eventually hear their story. And so often, a guest might come in to get an ID, and when an advocate starts working with her, she realizes she doesn't have her ID because she fled a domestic violence situation and left everything behind. So then the real focus becomes, housing and stability around that for that guest. But I know that oftentimes people on the front line of this work, they're not the highest paid people in the city, and the work they do is just so critical and vital. And they often bring their own lived experience with many of the issues that our guests face, whether that's substance use or homelessness or just economic disparity to the work, and they really just put their heart into it. I can't say enough about the staff of Women's Lunch Place, but we train. It's really important that they are really well experienced in trauma-informed care, motivational interviewing, crisis prevention and intervention. We want them to be the best in class staff so that they can give the best services to women, but they know and accept that it can take sometimes years and many years to get somebody to just move that needle a little bit. Right. But moving that needle can mean such a big difference to a guest who, maybe suffers from, major mental illness, and just getting that relationship, maybe getting them started with some mental health care. Their quality of life can be so improved.
Two things happened this year so far. One, Mayor Michelle Wu had released a guidance to media on how to cover the folks that were living at Mass and Cass during the removal of the tents. Some in the media, myself included, were like, well, you shouldn't tell us what to do, but at the same time understanding treating human beings like human beings with the respect that they deserve during that period. And the other time that caught my attention was a protest, an anti-vaccine mandate protest that followed Mayor Wu to the women's Pine Street Inn facility. And I was struck by how on one hand we're paying attention to the humanity and protecting the folks who are experiencing this trauma. And on the other hand, you've got especially women who have their own particular traumas being protested for something that really didn't have anything to do with them outside of a space for them that should be safe. Have you seen us as a society doing a better job putting the humanity of folks experiencing addiction and experiencing homelessness? Have we worked better at centering that as we talk about ways that we can help and ways that we have to keep the whole community safe?
Well, I think we talk about it more. I think it's more public. I think most folks can reflect on their own family and know that somewhere a sister, a brother, an aunt, an uncle has been facing some of the same challenges that our homeless guests are. And many people will say to me, Jennifer, I look at, I come in to volunteer, or I look at your website and I look at those women and I think, why isn't that me? And most people think it's just luck. I had something bad happen, but somebody else stepped in, or I had a good education when my husband left me. So, I think that there's people can relate to these issues. They're not singular to the homeless community. Substance use is throughout every facet of our society. Mental illness is every facet of our society. So I think the fact that we're talking about the issues, really, that the complex issues that are the basis of homelessness, I think people can understand that. They can understand, for women, trauma in childhood, physical and emotional abuse is a large percentage of women who are homeless have experienced that. And I think when you see the woman in front of you who's homeless, I often see the child that woman was. And, when a woman's really being very vocal or agitated, our staff is just trained to sort of see beyond that activity into the essential problem behind it.
So Jennifer, the temperatures have driven many people from Obvious View who are experiencing homelessness, and certainly the tents have been, I haven't checked today, but I think most of the tents, if not all of them, are gone from the Mass and Cass area, but the challenge of homelessness continues. What can folks do for the Women's Lunch Place and for other facilities and organizations? What do you need?
Yeah, I mean, the answer to homelessness is affordable housing. So we all have to get behind Mayor Wu's efforts to provide more affordable housing and different varieties of that. A single room occupancy can be a really good option for a homeless woman. And, for some with children, there's different options that need to be out there. But I also would like to, explore further, gender-specific housing for women, a safe place where they can work on their unique needs. That would be a really wonderful thing for women. And we don't, because of fair housing rules and stuff, there are ways to address it. But I think that's something that's going to be really important for the population of women that we serve.
Jennifer Hanlon Wigon, thanks for joining us. That's it for tonight. Thanks for watching.